Adventure in Pipeman on W4CY Radio.
Wake up, America! It's time for the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY.com, West Palm Beach's #1 internet radio station. Here's your host, the Pipeman.
I'm looking at the sky, feeling kind of small. I'm looking at my life, make some sense of it all.
This is the Pipeman here on the Adventures of Pipeman W4CY Radio, and I'm here with our next guest, who is a amazing songwriter, musician, and just, you know, like has some of the greatest sounds I've heard. So let's welcome to his show, Steve Postell. How are you?
Good to be here. Good to meet you, and that's a very nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. Well, you know, we're just going to be walking through these blues, right?
That's what I do every day.
There you go. So tell us about the new album. It dropped this month, and it's got, you know, not only such great music on it, but you brought along a lot of great musicians that are people you've played with and are friends of yours throughout your career.
Well, that's one of the advantages of getting old, is you know a lot of people. Yeah, this was a little different than other records I've made in that in the time I was able to take to make it, and that was not a plan going into it. But what happened was I started making the record and was pretty well into it when COVID really put its grips into everyone's plans. And so for the first time in my life since I was 18, there was going to be no gigs. And for someone like me who's not a household name, there's really no reason to put out a record if I can't go play, because that's how people hear about the record and so on. So I decided to hold on to it and keep working on it. And then as it got more evolved, and the COVID thing was lightening up, then the Immediate Family, which is this other band I'm in, which I'm sure we'll talk about, with Leland Sklar and Russ Kunkel and Waddy Wachtel and Danny Kortchmar, we did a record, which we had started during COVID, and we released that. So that was like, okay, I'm going to hold on to my record. I don't want to compete with my own band. And then finally, Immediate Family's in between records. The timing was right. I'm going back on tour a lot. So and so the advantage of that was not only did I technically take my time, which means mixing it over and over again and adding parts, I was able to get all my friends on it because there was no scheduling issue. Oh, you're free in a month? No problem. That kind of thing. And I was able to actually write a couple new songs, that like one I wrote with Glen Phillips from Toad the Wet Sprocket, which would never have been on it if I'd have released it when I originally worked on it.
That's pretty amazing. You know, I have said for a while too, like COVID, there's a lot of negative things about COVID, but I think one of the positive things about COVID is like musicians got a chance to jump off the hamster wheel and start creating again, and like have the actual time to create and think, and, you know, not be rushing from one project to another.
It definitely slowed things down, and I think that's true. We did a lot of work remotely with the Immediate Family, where we made videos where we would all film ourselves in our own studio, and then the editor would put it together, and yeah, there was a way in which literally the first time in my life I had no gigs, my adult life, and there was I don't want that to happen again, but it was refreshing for a little while.
You know, it's interesting too, because I look back on that time and, you know, during it, I hated that there was no live music. And, you know, I was doing all these festivals that all of a sudden were all canceled. And But now looking back on it, I'm like, it was kind of nice to get a little bit of a rest, and just sit back and like evaluate everything instead of keep being on the run, and now I think people, both the musicians, the songwriters, the listeners, the attendees of live concerts, all have a different perspective now where it's appreciated more, I think.
Oh, no question about it. When I finally went back on tour, I felt that energy from the audiences. I really felt like, oh, we're so glad to be back doing this again. I really had a real visceral sense of the audience being grateful, not just for the music, but just for being able to be there. A lot of things happened in our industry during the beginning. One of them, which was an interesting byproduct, there were more guitar sales than there'd been in 20 years during the first 2 years of COVID.
Wow.
And it brought the guitar industry kind of back because people were sitting home. Well, I'll learn the guitar, I guess,
I could see that though, because like if you're an adult and you're not a guitarist, you don't really have time to learn the guitar because you got so many other things going on. So now you finally have some downtime, and it's like probably people that always wanted to play guitar and they never had the time to do it.
It clearly happened. I mean, the statistics are in, and I mean, clothing sales probably went down. I wore pajamas for a year and a half.
Right. And so tell us about what the different songs on this new album and what made you decide which artist to be part of what song.
I feel like there's an old, I don't know, it's one of these sayings that is attributed to different artists over the years, which is with sculptors that the sculpture is inside of the block of wood and they just have to peel away the stuff till they find it. It's sort of a metaphor for what they're doing. And I feel like songs, they tell me a lot. Even though I'm writing them, I'm kind of finding them. And then after I find them and write them, often they speak to me in the sense of, what would be good on this song is so-and-so's voice. I mean, that happened with the song Buried Stone. I'd written it, I recorded the basic tracks, and as I was recording it, I started to say, this feels like sort of a duet, like I should be communicating with a woman on this. And then I heard a voice in my head, and then whose voice is that? Oh, it's Bekka Bramlett's voice in my head. And I called her and she did it and did a beautiful job. So it's kind of, I try to listen to the song, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That's actually pretty cool to hear because it just shows that it's not really random. It is something like you're really in tune with the music and like it just makes it an easy decision.
Yeah, it's not just, oh, who's in my Rolodex? No, I mean, the song that Crosby sang on, I didn't plan to have him necessarily on the record. I played on his records and we worked together, but then this song, I wrote this song and I heard his voice and I went, oh, this is definitely a Cros song.
Nice. Funny story. A lot of years ago when I was like, I think I was like 15 years old. So probably, yeah. So a lot of years ago, my dad, he was in the hot tub business and we lived in California and he sold this spot to this dude that had this really cool Cobra. And the guy took me for a drive and it was like the real thing. And, that was, I don't even remember his name, but apparently he was the guitarist for David Crosby band then, which is like, 40 some odd years ago.
Right.
So I thought it was cool. I think it's cool when I hear stuff like this because it just brings me back to a time because, for people like both of us, music is like a lifetime. When people say, well, they're not really into that anymore. To me, there's people like you and I that it's like music has been a lifetime of, I think, therapy. It's the thing that makes us feel great.
Yeah, I never really ever really thought about that I had an option to do something else. And fortunately for me and for a lot of my friends who are all these great musicians that we all hang out and work together, it's no less fun. It's more fun because I know more. I've
Right.
I mean, it's a little more tiring sometimes, you know, but it continues to be for me a real source of life force, joy. It's and curiosity and exploration. It just never stops being that.
And speaking of tiring, you have a spring tour. And, it's funny because my daughter always thinks like when I go out and I cover all these music festivals, one after another, weekend after weekend, she's like, I don't even know how you do that. I'm tired after half of the first day. And me, I just don't get tired from it.
Well, it's definitely tiring. I mean, you have
Right.
to, and actually, a lot more so as you get older. That's just the reality of it. And so a lot of what happens for me now on a tour, I've learned how to do it, is really preserving my energy. That means I don't talk a lot on a tour. I'm not on the phone all day. Um, I do still I like still work out, but a little, more of a casual, like a 3-mile walk instead of a 3-mile run. It's a lot about what I eat and preserving, trying to get enough sleep and really paying attention so that my peak energy happens for those 2 hours that we're on stage.
Yeah. And so what does it feel like when you get on stage for people that haven't had that experience? Because it's kind of like you get in a zone, right?
Yeah, there's it's funny what Waddy Wachtel in our immediate fans said, if you don't get nervous, you don't give a shit.
Right.
So there's still this, it's not intense nervousness, but it's not stage fright, but there's still like, your adrenaline's up, you're a little nervous. And for me, once the first note happens, I get in unless something's really wrong, I just get in the zone. I'm not really thinking about much.
Right.
I'm noticing. I notice, but I can see the audience. But it's a really otherworldly state. Uh, it's not an intellectual state. It's a very present state. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. I had years ago. Was at a lecture by a Tibetan Buddhist priest, and he said he was talking about the state that the meditation they get into. He said, "Now musicians, they know that they get in this state when they play it." And I was like, "Wow, that's interesting." Yeah. So it's a very, very present. If you're doing it long enough that you're comfortable and you have enough years under your belt, you just kind of get in extremely present. You're just in that moment. You're not thinking about that moment. You're not analyzing it. And then after the show, you're like, oh, that happened. That's cool. So it's something I love. I love the energy of it.
It is, yeah. And the crowd energy. It's kind of like a drug, right?
Well, it's a conversation. It's a conversation with the audience, and the audience is just as important as we are. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And you can feel. It's funny. It's funny. We have these. We're rehearsing right in an hour. We have a rehearsal. We're rehearsing for this coming up tour, and I've been going over the tapes from the last tour, live tapes, and I was a little shocked at the level of enthusiasm at the end of each song, cheering and from the audience, because you're just doing it. I mean, I notice it, but not like, oh wow, but listening back, I'm like, wow, they really like this music. That's cool.
And that's part of that being in the zone. It's kind of like you don't notice certain things. I think it's really what gets rid of the nervousness too. So even for somebody like me, as getting on the radio, or I'm also a speaker when I get up on stage and I speak. Yeah, I'm nervous right before I get on stage, or I'm nervous right before I turn on the mic. But as soon as that mic goes on, there's like this switch inside my head, and it's almost like an out of body experience.
Yeah, you get really dialed in, and then you're just, it's if you've done your work, like the Malcolm Gladwell said, the 10,000 hours, and for musicians, it's probably 100,000 hours of
Right.
practice. You can count on that to take hold, take root in what you're doing, so that you've done this a million times, and you feel the energy for sure, different energies of the audience, and actually sometimes it changes. You feed off of that, and
Yeah.
you actually play probably slightly. It's subtle, but slightly differently for every audience, because energy shifts a little bit.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So tell us a little bit about the spring tour, and what people can expect from all your shows, your live shows.
Well, this particular tour, which really is an offshoot of before David Crosby passed away suddenly and sadly, we were preparing to go on tour with a new band and sort of a set list he wanted to do, which was he wanted to go back to a little bit more of what CSN and CSNY had done in their sets, as opposed to the more Crosby-centric shows he'd done in the last few years. There still were those songs in there, but we were bringing back in CSNY stuff. And we didn't get to go on tour. We got to put the show together. We got to rehearse, and right in the middle of all of it, all of a sudden he was gone.
Mm.
And that led to about 6-7 months later, his son, James Raymond, his keyboard player, musical director of that band, with me. And I did a tribute concert at the theater we were supposed to start the tour at, to fulfill so the people who had bought tickets to the show.
Mm-hmm.
A wonderful concert. We had Sean Colvin and Richard Page and Colin Hay and Chris Stills and wonderful, and the band that Crosby had chosen for that tour. And it went so well that I got approached, like, people would love this. Why don't you think about taking it on the road? So that's how it got sort of the generated, and the inception of it was Crosby's band leading into the tribute, leading into these tours. And we're just doing a lot of those songs that we were going to do then. It's sort of my friend Jeff Pivar, who played with David for 28 years, brilliant guitar player, and I sort of put together a set list of what we would want to hear if we could go and see Crosby, Stills and Nash at their Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young at their peak. What would we want them to play? And that's kind of
Right.
That's how we created the set list. So it's incredible.
I love it.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of. I mean, it's unique in that, the Beatles had primarily John and Paul, and they wrote together and they wrote separately. This is 4 guys, 4 brilliant, iconic, visionary songwriters. That's the catalog. So it's pretty spectacular.
And it is pretty amazing when you take such superior songwriters and put them together, and they can actually work together and create, legendary music that lasts, generation after generation.
Yeah, it doesn't always work, and of course we know it's no secret they had their issues over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody can take away this music that they did, and if I can be a small part of keeping it alive and letting people hear it the way it's sort of supposed to sound, that I'm happy to do that.
I love it. And how do people connect with you, get to your website, get your new album, check out the tour dates, all that good stuff?
The Our House is what we call it. The Our House tour is on Bands in Town, I think it's called, Bands in Town /Our House. That's got all the dates on it. My Facebook page, if you're on that, always has the tours and but the bands in town is the general our house. And then for my tours and my new record and everything, you could either go to QuartoValleyRecords.com, which is the label, or my soon to be rebuilt website, which is just StevePostell.com. It's right now you'll say, wait a minute, didn't he do that 10 years ago? So it needs my attention, and when I get off this tour, the first thing I'm going to do is revamp my website.
Well, there you go. And if you were to leave the listeners with some final words, that we haven't covered already, that's coming up or they need to know, what would it be?
Well, a couple things. I would say, please support live music as much as you can. It's as I tour around the country and I play these beautiful theaters that were art houses, opera houses, old movie houses, my fingers are crossed. Like, people have to keep going to these places or they'll die.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful way to experience music. It's not with little headphones, little earbuds in. It's a real visceral experience. It's to me an unmatched way to see music. So I think that's what I'd ask people is go do it once in a while. Just get off your couch and go see some live music. I'm in the studio this right here a lot, and I love the process, but there's nothing like going out and playing live. And after this tour, there'll be more immediate family shows. There'll be more Steve Postell shows. So love to see you anytime.
Yeah. And you're absolutely correct, because, I've gone to those theater shows and it's like, it's just a different experience. It's if you haven't experienced it, you have to do it. And anybody that has already is definitely going to, for sure.
It's different on so many, even just sonically, even just the sound bouncing off these old walls instead of through two speakers. It's and then real people interacting. And that's the other thing, is so many of the modern shows, half the music you're hearing is actually pre-recorded and tuned, and this is real guys and women playing in the moment. There's no bells and whistles. No, we're not playing to a click. We're just playing, and that's, to me, the way music should be presented and heard.
Oh, I agree 1,000,000%. I mean, oh my God, what a concept, actually playing the music.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you are definitely an amazing songwriter, amazing musician. Everybody has to check out the new album. It is badass.
Thank you.
Walking through these blues, and if there's a show near you, you gotta catch it, because you're right. There's nothing better than a live show, and you know what? You gotta get out there and just experience life, and there's no better way to do it but with music. So thank you for giving that to us, and thanks for being on the Adventures of Pipeman.
Very happy to be here. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too, brother.
Okay, man.
Thank you for listening to the Adventures of Pipeman on W4CY Radio.